so this is where things start getting interesting. So I think after this is when Kendrick goes on tour with Drake. And I think that, wow, Kendrick was on tour with Drake. Kendrick saw something that Drake did, Drake and friends did, that changed his mind and like totally like, I don't want to say fucked Kendrick up, but like Kendrick was like, oh, no. And I think it was something that he saw, and I think Drake also did something to Kendrick or like something around, that would affect Kendrick. Because so after that, in 2012, Kendrick drops Good Kid, Mad City, which is beautiful album. I think it was in the top 5 of the best albums of this generation that Spotify like dropped or something like that. I was going back to annotate Poetic Justice and a couple other songs, and I just wanted to fall back into it again. Like, I wish I could go back to the first time I heard that album. But, anyways, it was a beautiful album, and I will be going back to dive deep into like Kendrick's actual albums and really going through each song on the album, but after I go through the beef stuff, only because it's just fun for me. Anyways, so 2012, Kendrick drops Good Kid, Mad City. On Drake is on Poetic Justice. And so Poetic Justice, the sample of the song, like I'm sure everybody's heard Poetic Justice, like sound like poetic justice. Poetic justice. Would you just it? Okay, so the sample of the song is a Janet Jackson song. And the movie Poetic Justice, Janet is in the movie with Tupac. And Tupac is one of Kendrick's like biggest idols. It's someone that he really looks up to, and he kind of tries to like embody in his music and the way that he moves in the industry. And so overall, like the basis of the movie Poetic Justice is about a girl, Justice, who is Janet Jackson, that writes poetry after the murder of her boyfriend. And as I guess as they're on their way to like this convention, um Tupac's character is with them, and she kind of like grows a relationship with Tupac's character. And so it's kind of like, will she be able to open her heart again for love? And this is kind of the theme of the song. So Kendrick on the surface is telling a story about this girl Shireen that he was messing with when he was an adolescent. And so on the surface, he's talking to Shireen. But I think that that Kendrick set Drake up on the song to kind of diss himself, because at the end, Kendrick kind of speaks to Drake in a way, but on the surface, it's to Shireen. So it has like a double meaning. So after the beginning part, it's like every second, every minute, it's Kendrick Lamar's verse. He says, I recognize your fragrance. Hold up, you ain't ever gotta say shit. So basically he's saying you don't even have to say anything when you step in the room or when you walk by, like I know it's you because I recognize your fragrance. And I know your taste is a little bit high maintenance. Everybody else basic. You live life on an everyday basis. So here he's saying, I know you have expensive taste. Everybody else is, basic, but you kind of just wake up and do life. Like you're kind of more carefree in a way. With poetic justice, if I told you that a flower bloomed in a dark room, would you trust it? So here he's asking, like, would you kind of believe the impossible? A flower normally doesn't bloom in a dark place. It needs sun, things like that. But under very rare circumstances, it can. So he's saying, would you believe, like, some of the most impossible things? And he's also saying, like, I'm Kendrick Lamar, am the flower that bloomed in a dark room being Mad City. Me, Kendrick, good kid, bloomed in the dark room, Mat City. He says, I mean, I write poems in these songs dedicated to you. So he's telling Shireen, but I also think he's telling Drake, I'm writing poems to you in these songs. Listen. When you're in the mood for empathy, there's blood in my pen. So when you're in the mood to, sit down and kind of be empathetic and vulnerable, you can see that I put my, you know, all into this, my pain and my heart into my music. I think him saying this to Drake is kind of saying too, like, whenever you're ready to talk about real stuff, like, I'm telling you, I'm here to write that. Um, well, not write it for you, but basically, these songs are to speak to you when you're ready to come and we can sit down and, talk about real stuff. The next part says, I really want to show you off. Fuck that. And I think it's important that you say it like that specifically because Kendrick says that a lot in his songs, and it's technically like fuck that, but people call him K dot, and so it's kind of also him saying like F dot, like fuck dot. I really want to show you off. Pour up plenty of champagne, cold nights when you curse his name. You called up your girlfriends and y'all curled in that little bitty range. So basically, he's just saying, I want to meet with your friends. That's kind of like, when you're dating someone, meeting their friends is like a big deal. Um, she want to go and party. She want to go and party. Don't approach her with that Atari. That ain't good game, homie. Sorry. So this part is so interesting because um third person actually on here, he does a lot of like breakdowns, and he had some really interesting theories going around that some of them I was thinking too, so it was just cool to see that someone else was kind of on the same page. But here he's saying don't approach her with that Atari. An Atari is like an old school game that kids used to play. And so I think he's telling Drake, like, if you're going to approach a young girl, you would approach them with like a toy or something, in that sense. He's saying, don't approach young girls. Like, that's not good game, homie. Like, I think that's what Kendrick's trying to say there. They say conversation rule a nation, I can tell, but I can never right my wrongs lest I write it down for real. So here Kendrick is saying, like, having conversation and what's put out in the media and what you talk about in your songs and everything can impact worldview, and like he said, can rule a nation. Like, our media and the way that we consume things really does affect how you think, and we're seeing that now. If you're tapped in. But no, if you are starting to realize, like, we're censored here, and it's important what you do put out into the world because it can change the way you think and act. I think Kendrick is also saying that he realizes that, like, what he puts out and what he talks about can incite like violence and stuff, and we see that too because, like I said, Tupac is one of his idols, and so he references him a lot. And you kind of saw that, like, what Tupac was doing with his music and his career was really awakening people, and people were catching on to things that like the government was doing. And there was a bunch of conspiracies that came out after Tupac died that it was the government that killed off Tupac because he was spilling too many secrets, basically, which is what Kendrick has set out to do. I'm so weak because the next part is Drake's part, and like, not even to be shady, but Drake doesn't have like deep raps. Like, as I'm going through his raps, there's really nothing more to his raps than what he says, which is okay. Like, not every rapper needs to be a deep rapper. Sometimes you do need, just songs you can vibe to that are surface level. And his verse is very surface level. He's talking up a girl basically. But what's something that's really interesting that I noticed, he says, young East African girl, you too busy fucking with your other man, whatever. But I think it's so interesting that he said young East African girl, now that we know what Drake is into. So I also thought it was interesting. In the next part, he says, "That sound like poetic justice. Poetic justice. You were so new to this life, but goddamn, you got adjusted. I mean, I write poems in these songs dedicated to the fun sex." So here we kind of see the difference between Drake and Kendrick. Drake here is talking about like he's just focused on the fun and the sex and the women of it all. That's what I write these poems for. But earlier we heard Kendrick say, "I write poems in these songs dedicated to you. Like I'm trying to tell you, I'm trying to send you messages. I'm trying to do more with my art." Um and then also at the end of Drake's little verse he says, "They say communication save relations, I can tell." And so here you could see that like Kendrick is earlier he says communications rule the nations, whereas Drake is just talking about like a relationship. And I think here Drake is not really understanding that, you can communicate with Kendrick and you can sit down, like he said, when you're ready for this empathy, you can sit down, we can have a conversation. But he says, "I can never right my wrongs unless I write them down for real." And he doesn't write his own raps. So he's never gonna right his wrongs. Like Kendrick, what? That's crazy. Like he dead ass set him up. Okay, so he says, "Every time I write these words, they become a taboo, making sure my punctuation curve, every letter here is true." So this part he's saying every time I write these words, every time I make a song, every time I come out with a song, it becomes taboo. I'm talking about these topics that nobody wants to talk about. And Kendrick is often controversial. Like his music is often controversial, and as we could see, like he's ends up on like Fox News, people talking about his music because of what he talks about. And when he says making sure my punctuation curve, every letter here's true, I was thinking like he's making sure that he's dotting his T's and crossing his I's, making sure every punctuation is there and letting us know that he's writing down the truth in his words. It can also mean like a comma is, punctuation with a curve, whereas a period is, a dot. It doesn't have a curve. Commas mean that the sentence keeps going. Periods means the sentence stops. So if he's talking to Drake in this sense, um, he's kind of saying like he never stops. He's the comma, making sure my punctuation curve, making sure I'm the comma, making sure I'm never gonna stop. And the next part he says, "Living my life in the margin," and that metaphor was proof. So a margin in your paper is like the small little blank space that you sometimes like write annotations in. Um, and you know we know that Kendrick's never really in the public eye. He's always ducked off, like living his life on the side, on the margins. And I think also what he means by that is he doesn't approach his music in the same way that most people do. Like he has a specific certain way that he approaches it, which is like on the margin. When people say like, "Oh, they're eccentric," or they're like the black sheep, like I feel like that's also what he could be talking about as well in this line. And he goes on to say, "Poetic justice, poetic justice. If I told you that a flower bloomed in a dark room, would you trust it?" Again, he's asking Shireen the question, would you believe the impossible? Would you believe that I was gonna make it? And also Drake, I mean, you need to hear this. Love is not just a verb, it's you looking in the mirror. So here he's saying love is not just, hooking up and having sex. Um, it's more than that. It's you looking in the mirror, it's you taking the time to love yourself. Love is not just a verb, it's you looking for it, maybe. So here he's, talking to Drake saying, hold on, let me pull up my annotations for the side part. Okay, he says, um, you know, outside of the whole Drake theory, him talking to Shireen, because Shireen was from the opposite gang like neighborhood that Kendrick is from. And so throughout Good Kid Mad City, he talks about, and he has like skits in the album that talk about like the dangerous connection that they have. It's kind of like a Romeo and Juliet type of thing. So here he's saying like you are soul searching and um sorry, hold on. Okay. I got the two mixed up. Basically, when he's saying you're looking for it, he's telling Drake like you're soul searching. You need to be soul searching. That could also be what love means. He says, "Call me crazy. We can both be insane. A fatal attraction is common, and what we have common is pain." So again, with the Romeo and Juliet, Kendrick talking to Shireen. Okay, I don't know what happened there at the end, but it cut off like the best part. Okay, so after the looking in the mirror, telling Drake to look for his, or to look in, search for his soul, he says, "A fatal attraction is common, and what we have common is pain." And so part of the fatal attraction is, like I mentioned earlier, how him and Shireen, their love story is kind of like a fatal attraction. Like what drew them together is ultimately what's going to be their demise. And in the album, after this song, we hear what that is. But also in him speaking to Drake, he's telling him like, um, we were both attracted to the fame and we both have this pain, but are we gonna have the same demise, basically? And then at the end, he says, "Read slow and you'll find gold mines in these lines. Sincerely yours truly, right before you go blind." So here, Kendrick is telling Drake, like, read slowly. And I think he's also telling us as an audience, as a consumer of his music, read slowly and go back through my music, and you'll find these valuable lessons, the gold mines being the valuable lessons in my songs and to Drake specifically, and then surface level to Shireen to go back through the song and she'll find like the love that he has for her, basically. So this is Poetic Justice. So this comes out, and then let's go back to the timeline. Okay, so yeah, that was 2012. Then 2013 is the big control verse. Now, these verses, the control verse and the cipher are two like hardcore Kendrick raps that I just love. And they took me a little bit of time and I'm still kind of, diving into them, but I'm gonna get to those next, and then maybe tomorrow or later on, depending on how much time I have, continue on, but we'll see. Also, I had to, I'm a recovering perfectionist. And I was going back and listening to the videos, and I kept hearing like when I hit my S's, they'd be strong and they were hurting my ears. So I changed the little boom thing to this regular mic. It's not as cute, but I hope it helps with the S's because it's like super strong and it hurts my ears. So I'm sorry.